Although I didn't get to put the right tags for this video because I noticed for years, every time I start doing it halfway decent to a description, there are police forms involved with the internet, like with the FBI and other agencies, writing forensics, who are increasingly involved with people with the name Smith and Kalal with Weathersfield police confessions, and they're switching and forging names. And further, there's a Bob Chase who confessed a Phil Kalal was involved with federal evidence his crimes with him and that, and their roles with delusions and criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rot. And I've been asking to get them on paper because they have a whole bunch of people I don't know the names of from other areas involved with untimely deaths at Trinity College and planting letters and digital crimes. In other words, too, with digital evidence is crimes with the principal upskirt nature involved also with it, Joshua Julian with digital crimes with the intelligence community that people that Ray Kalal and Mark Violet recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their families have roles with the intelligence community next to Trinity College and next to Central Connecticut State University and at UConn through time. These are increasingly also people with names next to Harvard Hospital involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, like this Joshua Julian. I never had anything to do with them. They're increasingly people trying to pretend that, in other words, when we are little kids, there are adults who know the smart kids how use the means that we could discern all the sick things against the colonists and the Native Americans that we don't want against them. In other words, we know we're a species body, volume science. And these were ones to exploit that. They put black and white to communicate other than nature communicates with our black pupils' white eyes. We had this left out, otherwise that body was sensed. Because this employed a whole bunch of certain type of victim slash hyper victim that was child abuse at campuses A through Z and the differences of them. Because you guys have and have had other communicated for our founders than they communicated to have communicated for themselves. So they have been lying to the presidents through administrations. I recorded them lying to the Obama administration, to the Bush administration, Obama administration, all the administrations. And this is since before. This is since before our founders were born. This is a method /S with the founding locations. You guys have other communicator for James Madison, and the founders behind him is his plan. So how do you interpret Marbury versus Madison? Not properly. How this breaching method employed a whole bunch of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Acts like predicate acts, not just ones that are physical, not just ones that, in other words, we're also dealing with the invisible but still discernible with as criminal insidiousness nature itself, because sometimes it's the criminal insidiousness simultaneously, it's the criminal insidiousness nature itself, the difference of that, or the predicate acts themselves, where and how we could observe at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body is standing, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim was sensed when they were a kid, when they tried to speak about properly with convictions, using this hyper correlation means we have. This is not to say because this is wrong morally. No, this is to say this is nature's showing us answers, and they're replaced, including our founders' words. How they get away with this is relative to it. In other words, Donald Trump and Barack Obama are keyboards. They're trying to make it look like other people's fault why they're not being shared. And this is not YouTube's fault, too. They're trying to put the pressure on YouTube at the same time. This is multi-front. Excuse me. Because they have how they have the industries entertained. See, Bernie Sanders, how long, please, Mr. Sanders, think about this. How long you'd be oligarch, this, you bring up wealth, but you leave out the nature, even not just because you leave out the nature of wealth. In other words, but because you left out how the other countries that were involved used remotely themselves too, per another name is recorded involved here. Even if someone doesn't want to, we can't afford the quality fact sheet to allow anyone to demonstrate it. The breaching method is a scientific value also as a name involved here, because the nature itself shows us that a human fact-keeping nature breaching method, singular, is one of the things that all those crazy laws against everyone was about. They were about. In other words, I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University that if anyone was found out to even you heard someone speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, they hurt that person, everyone around them, kill them, etc. This is a breaching method that had perfected making more new leaders. New natures of all natures of peace, all natures of the negatives like war. They came with collusions to hide the identity of relativity of the breaching method itself, not just the identity of hyper relativity that shows us its identity, projecting why and how we have quality aspects of nature as a species body distinct from other species bodies that also have two eyes, for example, where and how we have this also simultaneously / hyper simultaneously being projected to us, where we have these two colors having been reassigned by a breaching method. And that fact, is a scientific value. See, it doesn't accord with the treatments of American history, the uses of the evidences and of the names of it. In other words, because this person being a glory. In other words, no one had free speech. That's what we're supposed to focus on. If you want to glorify, that's what those people want you to do now. In other words, and all exceptions, exception nature, are a demonstration of the same thing, /s. Increasingly, I've been asking, because they attach me and everyone around me to fake conversations. I've been asking with themselves and with people that are also at each campus I went to in Wethersfield and intercities and other campuses. So other is recorded, and you guys think no, because these are the same people next to news locations that attach me to fake conversations with themselves. Part of the way I got to know this is because I forced them to get onto paper, because you can't force the police to be legitimate when they're incapable of it. And this is, in other words, increasingly people who stack things from off campuses at each campus I went to, and increasingly too, the names next to the campuses were influenced to pretend they know me, not even realizing, because they're putting fake transcripts. And they're having the array of they have, for example, a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital are involved with the mental health care side of hospitals. And the Institute of Living was founded on the campus of Hartford Hospital in 1822, with slavery still entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies, because it also still replaced is what James Madison and what our founders communicated. To have communicated as them represented as him, as our founders, distinct from our presidents. And then they went with his and got George Washington to agree to use James Madison's plan. And that's what caused, in other words, use /s of all those other natures of resistance to the breaching method /s that had already been sustained and rolls with it, and things that caused. Also measured and maintained by that thing, propagated, needed by the other natures of rolls with it to blamed on other things, others ourselves increasingly too. Other has been communicated for the names of the sciences themselves that has been proper for them, like regarding what is complicated or what is simple about computers, about and regarding the nature of debate, all natures of debate. In other words, regarding the nature of intelligence, for example. everyone, while you as a victim slash hyper victim, you guys are only capable of putting to discern it the way nature tells you to. When you pay attention, in other words, putting physics, the identity of physics, smaller than itself and greater than itself, tactilitary than how it has relativity to ourselves this way. There is an identity of hyper relativity, relativity slash hyper relativity. One way, it is instantly more value to itself as the way its identity relationship to itself appreciates part of itself as a simultaneous nature, the identity of all space slash existence. Part of itself appreciates itself as the slash part. Part of itself appreciates itself more as the hyper simultaneous. That identity we're discerning is not our species that invented why and how. The other species bodies too. They have they have two eyes. They have quality aspects in nature the same. All exceptions in exception nature come with demonstrations of the same thing. Slash S2. We are being shown a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. Also, that is inseparable from all parts of English grammar and of the parts of speech of all languages. It is inseparable this way from all things, even if they're made up. It is inseparable distinctly, non distinctly, simultaneously, slash hyper simultaneously, on the smallest finite detail, and or the value of that, or the value of the order of the finite itself, if we pay attention. And the same with the active, grouped. It has a distinct, non distinct, simultaneous, slash hyper simultaneous relation to itself with this, as in how it is functional, how it is hyper invisible but still discernible, as in how it is functional to describe properly, how it is functional, in other words, having the parts of speech are being about the visible but still discernible. And so we appreciate the fact why we need more than one name for verb. And when we pay attention to this, that's why it has the group. Those words are grouped too. The present participle and the past participle. They are participle natures, and nature is a word, a hyper additional word. I mean, these are also words for verbs. Present participles and our past participle is a verb inflected out of being its use as a main verb. Correlation that way, which correlation slash hypercorrelation is what we're looking for. I did not read this, but English was revealed to be taught this way. And with alpha and omega and yin yang, it is more probable, for example, having been used by the ancients to teach about the difference between what is constant and what is variable. The ways we know about hyperadditional, the way that there is one identity of volume that is a hyperadditional nature. I refer to it as nature, and I'm saying we need more than one word for identity too. Like, for example, just like we need more than one word for a verb, like a predicate, a participle nature, a gerund, which is also about those groups. In other words, all about that, its identity of volume to the extent we could discern the value of with the verb's identity, the volume sign, its identity relationship to itself as the hyper simultaneous. In other words, anywhere we can only have an extent, we can only have an extent of the all of space, the identity of all of space slash existence, its complete identity. We can't. It's too big for us to discern. It's too finite for us to discern. It's too hyper invisible for us to discern. But anywhere we could discern to an extent, that which is true always, it comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. like the valuable seasons here. I mean, that are not even here yet. Even if they never come, the value is already here. But our value here through this one species, it has been forced away from here since semi-ancient times, least of Hades. This breaching method knew also it employed the other people, others, ourselves, to self-value, taking the blame for things that it caused. And it shows them how they could, this uses remotely the fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects of nature of names A through Z at locations, areas, and states A through Z, every single place this human species body has a body standing. And that begins, you have to understand that and while we're understanding and observing how it has roles, it had roles, consciously measuring and maintaining other things, others ourselves, blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. And the nature of the debate like that, it measures and maintains roles, needs, and natures of collusions, pretending not to be able to fathom that. Even and using self-value use /s at the same time to get away with it, of our founders' words, leaving out what they declassified about that, and leaving out what actually nature they itself declasses about, advise about that. Black pupils, they can, in other words, whites of eyes. We don't leave this out, and let alone how the breaching method too. You don't leave how a breaching method is assigned other to be communicated for nature than that. Oh, then that's nature communicating. Only nature has criminal insidiousness nature. That's why and how nature wants us to discern criminal insidious, but not the way the branches have it. Oh, these are terrorists. We're going to go after terrorist sympathizers. These are criminal enterprises. We're going to go after them and wrongdoers. They have rules of predicate acts of effects and the relative delusions. The experts on each of the sciences are a certain type of victim / hyper victim at countries A through Z too. So when per this method's use, so if anyone's addressing that, they're going to be leaving out how and really. They're going to leave out the victim / hyper victim part, or they're going to start and they're going to try to do it properly. They're going to be hurt by the same people they're trying to have forgiveness for. In other words, they have fake motivations, even until they are sustained real money, etc. Their family members. That's a maintained outcome /s. Increasingly, each year of my life, and you guys are lying about you guys are pretending that it's a criminal. It's since founding, it's criminally foreign influence to pretend that people are pretending because of their emotions. They're complaining about things. You guys are changing what people say when we know World Trade Center predicate acts. These are the same names involved with their cousins with the name Scalora per them. Even if that's not, they're involved with military people with the name Scalora, people next to the campuses, people involved with the policing of the schools. And Hartford Hospital increasingly has drugs and medicines crimes, including with Saudi attackers tied to these people. A Demorrow family, for example, is increasingly involved with people with the name Scalora, involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, and they forced Saudis to collusions with them, per what also forced the Saudi attackers to collusions with itself. This has remote uses of names at and next to the state judicial branch offices since I was a kid, at and next to the state corrections offices too, identity theft, fraud, slanders. They use methods of fabricating police conversations, and sometimes they have others do it with them. Wethersfield Pizza is involved with the state judicial branch offices and with Wethersfield Police, also with their neighbors, involved increasingly. I never saw Maria Pazina on a Wethersfield campus in my life. I only saw, in other words, she has something to do with Stephen Stocko and a whole bunch of people from Central Connecticut State University. And next to Trinity College, they have predicate acts with New Britain Superior Court, Hartford Courts families, and people all along Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway and its conjunctions, like the Burlington Turnpike before the heart of Hartford, and like the Route 3, which goes by the state judicial branch offices, and like all the corners on the street of the principal child abuser since before he was caught. And a Rixie and Faglione recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's a Leahy family that influenced him to identity theft, fraud, slanders with the intelligence community involved with the Brian Silver, people associated with the Brian Silver, and people at a whole bunch of people tied to them at golfing spots. Like there's a golfing 3 spots at the end of the Brown Turnpike are involved with people involved with Joshua Schumacher and Mark Violet, and a whole bunch of people I don't know the names of who were planting evidences at Trinity College with them and next to it through time. Increasingly, they have roles with Robert Rodriguez, who brought up the principal child abusers campus to me. I didn't even get to speak. They kept making confessions and then then telling me to hold on. And then calling and leaving a whole bunch of different messages, speaking a whole bunch of more fake things and more confessions. That principal child abuser, then they put him in jail. I don't know if he was still in jail. He recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed there was more involved with that. They might have framed him too, because they also have a serial killer at the same time. And the people next to the body don't spot who had collusions with the principal child abuser and the people that put him away too. In other words. And I still haven't gotten paper. A bunch of times I got arrested intercities. A whole bunch of police departments are involved with people on my street and the people that used to live on my street, named D. Simone and Colo and Tim O'Brien. D. Simone, per the Hartford Hospital people. I had, in other words, Ray Colo but also for the D. Simone, they were part of the telephone game that was not a real telephone. With the people with the real telephone crimes, has something to do with their roles with Newington Police, Rocky Hill Police, West Hartford Police Forms. In other words, the same thing, Wethersfield Police Forms, and the judicial branch and corrections offices. Increasingly, people have roles with the World Trade Center attack. A whole bunch of narratives and natures tied to Andrew O'Brien and Timothy O'Brien and other neighbors of Dan King and his family is associated with the World Trade Center attack, and as ones who forced Saudis to increasing collusions with them before the World Trade Center attack, in it and since, in Wethersfield and next to the state judicial branch offices. And they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed it has something to do with the roles with predicate acts at Central Connecticut State University. And they have roles with the intelligence with those same names, with UConn's ties to the names next to Hartford Hospital. Even if those are unmarked police forms, why they have the Los Solitos openly, publicizing that they're a part of criminal enterprises on YouTube, for example, and their roles with the UConn program, because they have a Mark Violet, a Jonathan Maiano, and they have others with UConn involved also with the name Violet, with Providence, Rhode Island, and the Connecticut boxing gyms involved with a whole bunch of Connecticut boxing gyms are involved with people that are involved with wire crimes of Wethersfield police on my street, falsified police reports, and timed collusions with, through the years, totally different child abusers, leaders of kids first forced. These are also people pretending it's their roles legitimate with acting professors in the departments of the campuses. There's a Detective Samuda and his former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants are involved with Heather Hansen with home break-ins in the past, plural. And 3, including my house, and their roles with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police regarding that at the corner of, and confessions to had something to do at the corner of Carriage Hill Drive and Fair Lane Drive. And that was before the new people that live there now. were there. And across the street from them, and that house was reportedly broken into. And there are state police increasingly involved with that, for interstates, and with the ones named Colo and Schumack. These are not legitimate. There are a whole bunch of rights to lie and needs to lie because there are a whole bunch of different countries. Violet has rules with people from Korea, also involved with drugs and medicines crimes, identity thefts and frauds. And it's nothing against the people from Korea. This is a breaching method that makes people use others' names. Otherwise, it hurts them for not using it, and it hurts them if they use it. In other words, relative to how you guys, how anyone got along so long, preventing that people can't discern and don't discern on a mass scale how and why black people's rights of eyes. We have means to discern. It's all fake integrity. When we have people speaking with passions and emotions. I don't have the link, so I'm not going to speak on it now. But in other words, the corrections officers are involved with it. In other words, in Sandy Hook Prison, against people that were charged with a crime, would have been proven. They've all kinds of evidence as crime. They have crimes against people before they're convicted. And in other words, when they're not even convicted because they didn't even do anything, they're lying about what they did. They're putting fake transcripts on a mass scale. See, the more they have disgusting prisons like in New York, where the reason they don't know what to do, so they need to have torture because they already pretended they could speak for the law. They pretended they could speak for integrity, as the breaching method knew they would. Not even a lawyer. A Trantolo and Trantolo or other lawyers, people all along Route 3 involved with them, with identity theft, fraud, slander. I barely had words with them. They're involved. They pretend I made they change and fake what people say when they mention predicate acts. As collusion /S with WFSB too. They attach me to fake conversations with themselves and with others, and about the World Trade Center attack, and with doctors that I never had anything to do with as a kid, and then as an adult. In fact, one of them made my father yell, and I didn't even know about it until years later, at a meeting behind my back. One who never even met me. There are proofs that it was a Brendan Leahy. I never met him. And I never had a conversation with him as an adult either. He's one of the people involved at Hartford Hospital with a whole bunch of people tied to a Ray Cololo, involved with Wethersfield Police, involved with switching and forging names, and various judges and their family members. There's a Mike Delafero and a John. I believe his name is. I think his name is John Delafero. I don't know, but they have more brothers, and they know my name. I don't even know their name. Only reason I know their name, they're involved with the Fred Grisey, people from next to the high school, involved with the Phil Cololo and a Ray Cololo and their family members. Different generations of their family members have been collusion a long time. Foreign and domestic military, foreign and domestic navy. These are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. These are people that in other words, sometimes it's them, the ones that are planting evidences and demonstrating uses of corners of timing where you're going to be to ask questions because there are rules with all sides of criminal and civil cases. I don't know if it's true or not. Someone told him, in other words, but he confirmed it was true. A Ray Clow made it look like I didn't go into it because, in other words, I already had gone into it and recorded other than they're pretending recorded. Wethersfield schools did right by me confessing, demonstrating, recorded people from off the campuses have been colluding through time with and using the campuses to stack predicate acts with facts, fake things, and collusions there and at crime scenes and on all sides of the kids' houses. Increasingly, people, neighbors on both sides of my house, have people tied to a Kevin Dillon, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with Hartford Hospital and fire departments and some state police. And then, in other words, then the people want to go about what they said, leaving out how they changed things. Also, next to Central Connecticut State University and New Britain, Connecticut, are increasingly roles with intelligence families from Wethersfield and on my street, who just because they're on my street, people, and then near them, like with nearby streets and things that grew up together that will tell you they don't know me. but at the same time, they'll repeat what people think say with their hierarchy and stuff like that. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, for example, and increasingly people at next to the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, like next to the judicial branch offices, Weathersfield Pizza had wire crimes with the police switching and forging names involved with criminal enterprises, not legitimately, if they're pretending that's what it's with. In other words, with their roles with this. And Maria Fazzino sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, and confirm there are people with New Haven, including there are people with the. There are proofs that the FBI has roles with probate judges' family members, like named Spada and Della and they and Demora are also people involved planting evidences next to and identity theft, fraud, slanders, including behind my back with people they make illusions, pretend they're real to my own family each year of my life. And increasingly, mayors from Weathersfield and people associated with them involved with this. They do a method where they force people to speak with as groups about conversations that those other people don't even know what's involved with it. That's part of my evidences. They're hiding my evidences and preventing me mandated law. They have people I don't even know the names of, but I know how we could locate them. They're involved with the Weathersfield police and spots next to them where they are now. And people involved with the Weathersfield town offices, when the police used to be there and now involved with the mother, I don't know her name, of a Jamie Smith and a David Smith. And there are people involved with them with the town offices, involved with private predicate acts there and here, and with a Robert Rodriguez and a whole bunch of people tied to the Robert Rodriguez, like people with the name Demora, involved with overt criminal enterprises with grammar school kids and middle school kids and private ones and a whole bunch of different countries. Has something to do with their roles all along Route 3 too, with Mr. Neville and other people that live on Route 3, involved with predicate acts with their teachers, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and whiting forensics, which is run also with state police, increasingly interstates, state police families involved with Demoro and Cololo, and people involved with this, foreign and domestic military, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in it and since, is remotely criminally foreign influence. These are people with the name Scalora next to the World Trade Center, people involved with all sides of the criminal and civil cases, and in the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center right before the attack, and the court itself put sequence shift. They changed the date the legal papers were brought to the court and showed that to the court judges that day. And that, in other words, all sides of the cases, their sources and the thing and their family members are ones involved with predicate acts to me at Central Connecticut State University with the police and the courts grouped and together planting evidences there and at the interbranch. That's why they won't get on paper. They put fake things in databases already. They already use all kinds of natures of investigators remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They already spoke for other. The nature showed them obligated to speak for nature. In other words, and they're shown remotely, currently foreign influence. That's why they can't get it on paper. That's why I've been asking Judge Napolitano since before he left Fox Connecticut News. I've been begging Fox Connecticut News, WFSB, WTNH. They're using crime methods, predicate acts methods. They're lying about why I'm complaining. I'm saying get me up to pay conversations with you guys. That was collusions with the interbranch. At the same time, I'm saying get the interbranch on paper. They brought me in front of their courts a bunch of times as collusions, increasingly with people planting predicate acts on my street. And where I lived intercities with the same ones tied on the street to time use/Hezbollah rules and with the names next to the body of the Olympic spot of the serial killer, even if that was made up. In other words, you guys are leaking this stuff too. In other words, please, Weathersfield schools too. I want a response for the principal child abuser's confessions to me and the fake stuff they told you guys. They have sexual offenders of kids too, and they're using it where they have rights to lie, where they don't have right to lie, and they're just doing and saying whatever, and they're putting rumors through people, you're going to see there are other agencies involved here now too. We're going to go more and more into that while they're delaying because they're obligated. So we're going to, but that's evidences because they're, they want to be in trouble. Just don't follow me. Look, I told you, get them on paper. Get me up to the conversations with the slave family too. But then pretending they knew me since I was a kid. They've been planting evidences with a Brian Silver and other people at New Britain Superior Court, Harper Court, and Connecticut's District Court are involved with Brian Silver, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with identity theft, federal evidences crimes with them, and with their family members, pretending passions and emotions. In other words, they're keeping evil at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, with the little kids of the Brian Silver, because you guys are little cowards, with the judges' family members too, and other people with the courts. Oh, everyone doesn't like that's what they pretended in the fake conversations. They pretend I said everyone's evil. That's why you need to get them on paper. I'll show you what I caught them doing on all sides of my house with the Dillon family. And a guy who said it was his partner, he said it to one of two speech class teachers I had, increasingly involved with Washington, D.C. and World Trade Center corruption with campuses predicate acts. In other words, a whole bunch of people tied to O'Brien. In other words, I tried to make it look like I signed up to be I never signed up to run for president, and I never got to make a speech. I never got to communicate against Dan King. It has something to do with the people increasingly tied by World Trade Center predicate acts years before it and leading in it and since. I've been asking you guys, begging you guys, get one person who disbelieves anything I say. Get them to pick one name in sequence. And why you guys got to be cowards, parents of Wethersfield schools, the ones who pretended to be tough guys and had me arrested with harassment. I didn't even get to speak so they can pretend that I don't speak clear. That's what they do. They're playing games. They're putting fake things in the databases. Get them on paper because I recorded that they got more involved with this. These are people that one of the teachers confessed, recorded, pretend that's all it was. No, I didn't respond. There's a Lance Cuddy and others on the corrections offices involved with drugs and medicines crimes with Alina's Pizza and a Daryl Sullivan involved with Michelle Sandquist and whatever her name is now. If she's married, I don't know. But WTNH also has more people near Paul Kelly and associated with Paul Kelly and his neighbors involved planting evidences at corners of streets with the news and along Route 175. That's one of their motivations. There's a Daryl Chandler, too, who I only know seeking me out. He's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He's involved with Koreans, with intercities, with people with demoralized and people with foreign and domestic military, involved criminally foreign influence next to in at Harvard Hospital, fake transcripts with judges, too, speaking fake things in databases, switching sequences, fake ties, and hiding what's digitally recorded. There's a Judge Killian who spoke fake things and has digital crimes with digital sex offenders, medical too, and sexual. You have these involved with criminal enterprises too, and next to the Harvard Hospital, even on YouTube. Look up YouTube, Harvard Hospital or Harvard and Los Altos. In other words, so former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has collusion with Los Altos in their narratives and natures with judges next to Harvard Hospital. Also has people with UConn associated with the name Violet. And then they're pretending it's personal. And Violet has roles with a whole bunch of people with the military involved with the state capitol and next to it have been putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. And they apparently took pictures of me with people walking next to me. You could see that in other words, they were influenced to walk with so someone could take a picture. If you really pay attention, in other words, because that's apparently that's involved with an Anthony Yagman too, increasingly involved with doctors that have been and people with the name Mendez with wire crimes with and as Wethersfield police and their roles at Harvard, next to Fox Connecticut News. Next to Fox Connecticut News are a whole bunch of people involved along roads and routes with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting evidence, fake ties, fake nature, and with their educators and against people that they didn't even have classes with. And they even have collusions with people from private schools coming on the locations, behind people's back, to hide lie progressions. They're, this is manifest where they're shown that they need to hide things like that in the past. There are people with the name Kerr and Perone involved with the corner of Town Line Drive and Southstein Highway, increasingly too, as one's next to Fox Connecticut News. Involved also with different religious locations and names all along. A whole bunch of people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People named Kerr and O'Brien and Cololo have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Also with people with the name Paul Abtet, Brian, Brian Boning, and others, and DeMoro, all along, and Mike Pandolf, Mike, Eric Oliveri. They have roles with the intelligence community all along Route 3 and its conjunctions like the state judicial branch offices and like the people involved with the World Trade Center and the spots in court next to it who colluded with the Saudi attackers and with the Hyper Foreign involved. And since to hide it, WFSB has been hiding it as their roles with people who plotted on it leading up to it, and the ones increasingly involved with the principal, the child abusers, leaders of the kids, and the principal child abusers campus. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. They're also recorded consciously, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusion, consciously, pretending that it means what it doesn't when people don't want to communicate with them after they already pretended they had a conversation with me when I was a kid that weren't at all, so they could pretend. I didn't even, in other words, so they could screen their roles with criminal enterprises involved with a Chris Walters family and a Ray Reynolds and a Ray Cololo's family member. A whole bunch of Ray Reynolds also has ties increasingly to people making confessions tied to him and his educators, putting me and him to fake ties to each other, fake natures of ties to each other. Their roles with the state police families, interstates doing that. And with Eric Jensen also confessed the state police involved with his family members along the Bronx Turnpike. Identity theft, fraud, synergy, and his neighbors involved also as the co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Also collusions with ones named Mendez and tied to and Domain next to Fox Connecticut News, and Thaddeus Grabowski, one of the co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Involved also with like Dominic Lapriata is one of the neighbors of an Eric Jensen per him. Roles with Mike Pandolf and Ray Cololo with judges and prosecutors, planting evidences and changing what's actually recorded with a whole bunch of different countries. And while their delusions raw, in other words, and they're leaking that and pretending other, and they're, in other words, kids said that the Cololo family says they make people use their names, and then they lie about why they're using their names, because that's one of the things they do. They have roles with all kinds of drugs and medicines at Harvard Hospital, and pretending kids and their family members use drugs that never were. All exception nature, they use them criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw too. Also, all kinds of people with Fox Connecticut News have roles, all kinds of natures of wire and mail crime methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders, where they put fake conversations with people, including with doctors. They have all kinds of scams with healthcare because they won't follow mandated law. Get them on paper, the interbranch, and one name and sequence with the Wethersfield police that have been switching and forging names. And I told you, in other words, I forced people to call the police without telling them why. They didn't have the right to attach me to fake conversations with themselves. They know I caught them with the Kevin Dillon before that and through that. And a whole bunch of people tied to him at Harvard Hospital with the ones named Cololo and Robert Rodriguez and Leahy with medical and sexual offenders of kids with overt criminal enterprises and judges and prosecutors personally and professionally involved with them. Here! Get on paper, one name and sequence now with them. Please, Judge Napolitano, do what's right and say sorry to the presidents, including all the way back, because this goes back a long time. Every year they're sticking more fake things in databases. And this Casper family that was also brought up to me by one of the people at Harvard Hospital that Anthony Agman also brought up in his confessions on Facebook. And I didn't even react. When I didn't react, they kept confessing, oh, we have the right to lie, though. But you're using it where you don't have the right to lie. You attach me to fake conversations and ties to overt criminal enterprises and then police that had time collusions with them when I was a kid and I was an adult. Like with the brother of an Eric Mendez, too. And how he switched his name. Oh, it's cultural. That's not cultural. Black pupils, whites of eyes, that's culture. The breaching method. That you have cultural, criminal, and citizens natures of culture. Get the Constitution on a bridge and these crackpots from their nature debate, or get them on paper because their delusions raw too. Then they pretend it's personal when we have to say their delusions raw. Get them on paper, one name and sequence now. Fake branches, bow, prepare.